They say in Nigeria, there's a hotel where one door should never be opened. Room 406. Guests who enter are never seen again. Only their belongings remain, neatly folded as if they never existed. Some whisper the room is cursed. Others believe it is a passage to the dead. But what truly waits behind that door is far more terrifying than anyone imagines. Would you dare step inside room 406, knowing you might never return? In the bustling heart of Nigeria, where cities hum with restless life by day and fall into uneasy silence by night, stood an old hotel with faded yellow paint and cracked windows that caught the moonlight like shards of broken glass. The building had once been a jewel, its balconies lined with carved railings, its entrance marked by brass lamps that gleamed even in the rain. In the 1960s, it was a pride of the town, a place where travelers, traders, and dignitaries came to rest after long journeys. But by the time the story begins, the hotel had grown weary, its hallways stained by time, its walls echoing with more than footsteps. The locals still used it, though uneasily, for in a city where lodging was scarce, the old hotel was one of the few affordable choices. Taxi drivers dropped off passengers without ever meeting their eyes, and porters carried luggage with hurried hands, whispering prayers beneath their breath. For anyone who stayed here long enough, there was one rule: never ask about room 406, and never, under any circumstance, open its door. Among those who didn't believe in curses was Aduka, a young woman with sharp, searching eyes and a spirit that refused to bend. Aduka had been raised in a village miles away, where her grandmother filled her childhood with tales of spirits, omens, and curses that hid in the folds of ordinary life. Her grandmother's voice still lingered in Aduka's memory, telling her of restless souls that clung to objects, of rivers that swallowed the disobedient, of houses where shadows lingered even at noon. But Aduka had long dismissed those tales as relics of another generation. She believed in struggle and survival, in what she could see and touch. When she left her village to the city, it was not to chase dreams, but to escape despair. Poverty had dug its claws deep into her family, and Aduka carried the weight of feeding her younger siblings. She found work as a waitress in the very hotel that the city whispered about. At first, it felt like a blessing: steady pay, food to eat, and a roof over her head. The manager, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, gave her clear instructions: serve the guests, keep the lobby clean, and stay out of certain places. But Aduka was curious. She noticed how the staff grew tense whenever the fourth floor was mentioned, how their voices dipped into whispers, how they made signs of protection when the number 406 appeared in conversation. One night, while cleaning the reception desk, she asked the night guard, Baba Sola, about the strange fear. He shook his head, his wrinkled face folding with worry. "Child," he muttered, refusing to meet her eyes, "don't ask questions that don't need answers. Some doors are meant to stay shut." That only sharpened Aduka's interest. If the room was dangerous, why not close it off? Why keep it numbered, waiting like an open wound on the building's skin? The days in the hotel followed a rhythm. Guests checked in. Suitcases rolled across marble floors. The air smelled of dust mixed with perfume and sweat. Yet beneath the surface, there was always unease. Guests often left earlier than planned, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Aduka heard footsteps in the corridors when she knew no one was there. She dismissed it as her imagination, the creaking of old wood, the sighs of the building settling. But then came the incident that everyone tried to forget. A man named Okafor checked into the hotel, a traveling merchant with gold rings on his fingers and a booming laugh that filled the lobby. He was the kind of guest who made the staff uneasy, not because of fear, but because he mocked their caution. He had heard the rumors, and rather than avoid them, he leaned into them. "What's this nonsense about 406?" he sneered, his words loud enough to make a maid drop her tray. "You people believe too much in shadows." That night, despite warnings, he asked for room 406. The manager refused, offering him a different room. But Okafor was insistent. He threw money on the counter, his laughter echoing against the hollow ceiling. Reluctantly, The manager handed him the key. Aduka watched from the corner of the lobby as Okafor swaggered toward the stairs. Something inside her stirred, an unease that her grandmother's stories had planted long ago. She wanted to stop him, to snatch the key from his hand, but she said nothing. The following morning, his room was found empty. His suitcase lay neatly by the bed, his gold rings placed in a perfect line on the desk. But there was no trace of Okafor, no sound of departure, no witness of him leaving. His car still sat in the parking lot. It was as if the room had swallowed him whole. From that day, Aduka's curiosity grew into something heavier. Fear, threaded with fascination. Who, or what, claimed those who dared to stay in room 406? The staff spoke less and less about it, but Aduka couldn't let it go. At night, she found herself staring at the fourth-floor corridor from the bottom of the stairwell. The shadows there seemed thicker, the air colder. Sometimes she swore she saw movement, a flicker of something standing at the very end near the cursed door. Other times, she thought she heard a soft sound, like whispering, not words, but a faint rush of breath, as though the walls themselves sighed with secrets. Still, life carried on. Aduka worked, save or pay, sent money home. But her heart grew restless. She remembered her grandmother's warning. Curiosity feeds the spirits. They show themselves to those who look too long. And then, one evening, a storm rolled over the city. The power cut out, plunging the hotel into a dim glow lit only by candles in the lobby. Guests huddled together, whispering nervously. The manager tried to keep order, but the building groaned beneath the weight of the rain and wind. As Aduka carried water to frightened guests, she heard it. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from the fourth floor. But no one was upstairs. Her tray trembled in her hands. The sound grew louder, descending the staircase, then vanishing mid-step, as if swallowed by the storm. She looked up and, for the briefest moment, thought she saw a figure standing at the bend of the stairs. Tall, thin, its face hidden by shadow. When she blinked, it was gone. That night, Aduka couldn't sleep. The image of the figure burned into her mind. She lay awake, listening to the wind howl against the windows. And somewhere above her, faint but undeniable, she heard a door creak open and close. The next morning, the staff acted as though nothing had happened. But Aduka knew the hotel was holding something back, something alive in its silence. The question was no longer whether room 406 was cursed. It was why, and what waited inside for those bold or foolish enough to enter. The days that followed the storm stretched long and heavy. The hotel breathed like a restless beast, its walls groaning, its corridors colder than before. Aduka tried to bury herself in work, serving guests, cleaning tables, sweeping the grand lobby, but something gnawed at her spirit. Whenever she glanced at the staircase leading to the fourth floor, her chest tightened, as though unseen eyes clung to her every step. And then the dreams began. At first, they were faint, shadows moving across her sleep, whispers curling through her ears. But soon they sharpened into visions. In her dreams, Aduka saw the hallway of the fourth floor, endless and dark. The doors stood open, but inside each room was nothing but blackness, an abyss that seemed to breathe. At the far end stood room 406, its number glinting faintly in a light that had no source. The door would always creak open, revealing not a room, but a void. And from that void, pale hands would stretch outward, reaching for her, their nails long and sharp, their skin cold like death. Each time, Aduka woke with a gasp, her body drenched in sweat. She tried to shake it off, blaming exhaustion, but the dreams refused to leave. Meanwhile, guests continued to vanish. It happened subtly, so the hotel could mask it beneath excuses. A businessman from Lagos left his suitcase but never collected it. A young couple's shoes were found outside their door, but the room inside was empty. Each time, the management gave vague explanations. They left early, a family emergency. But the staff knew better. Their eyes told the truth. Fear was spreading like wildfire. One evening, Aduka was tasked with delivering towels to a guest on the third floor. The air was thick with humidity. her footsteps echoing down the hallway. As she passed the staircase, she froze. From above came a faint sound, drip, 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 like water falling onto stone. Curiosity prickled her skin, and despite herself, she tilted her head upward. There, at the top of the stairs, a trail of wet footprints shimmered under the dim light. Bare feet, small, fragile, as if a child had walked down from the fourth floor. Yet she knew no child stayed in the hotel. Her heart pounded as she followed the prints with her eyes. They stopped halfway down the staircase. Suddenly, abruptly, as though the child had vanished mid-step, the last print glistened for a moment, then faded into nothing. Aduka stumbled backward, the towels tumbling from her hands. She whispered a prayer, her grandmother's words surfacing like a shield. Spirits cling to what is forgotten. Do not follow their trail, for it leads where the living cannot return. From that moment, Aduka understood. The hotel was not just haunted, it was hungry. But hunger always leaves traces, and Aduka began to notice them everywhere. Guests complained of cold draft that cut through their rooms, even when windows were shut. Maids spoke of mirrors that fog with strange words, written in a language no one could read. The night guard admitted, with trembling lips, that he sometimes heard his own name whisper from behind locked doors. And always, it circled back to room 406. One night, Aduka lingered in the lobby after a shift, determined to uncover what the others feared to face. She waited until the last guest had retired, until the only sounds were the ticking of the old clock and the hiss of the rain outside. Slowly, she climbed the staircase, each step groaning beneath her weight. The fourth floor greeted her with silence, so heavy it pressed against her ears. The corridor stretched long, lit only by a single flickering bulb. The air was icy, her breath visible in faint clouds. Aduka's eyes locked on the door at the far end, room 406. Its brass numbers glinted as though freshly polished, though she knew no one dared touch it. She stepped closer, her feet trembling, and then from within came a sound. Not footsteps, not whispers. Singing, a low, mournful lullaby, sung by a woman's voice, drifting through cracks of the door. The melody was ancient, heavy with sorrow, yet strangely familiar. Aduka froze, her blood turning to ice. It was the same song her grandmother once sang to her as a child, the exact same tune. Her knees weakened. How could it be? Her grandmother had died years ago, buried in their village far from this cursed hotel. Yet the voice, soft, melodic, broken, was hers. Aduka pressed a trembling hand against the wood. The song stopped. The silence that followed was worse than singing. She pulled her hand back, heart racing, and fled down the corridor, refusing to look behind her. The following morning, Aduka tried to confide in the manager, but his face tightened with fear. "Forget what you heard," he snapped. "Do your work, Aduka. Do not bring the past into this place." But how could she forget when the past was already inside? Days passed, and the hotel sank deeper into unease. The air carried a smell now, faint, like burning candles mixed with damp soil. Guests complained of strange dreams. Some swore they saw figures standing at the end of their beds. Others reported hearing knocking inside their wardrobes at night. A woman left screaming, refusing to explain why, abandoning all her belongings in her room. Aduka's own dreams worsened. She began waking with bruises on her arms, shaped like handprints. Sometimes she found her shoes rearranged neatly by her bed, though she swore she hadn't touched them. One night, she woke to find her blanket pulled tight over her face, smothering her until she tore it away with a cry. Still, she felt drawn to room 406, as if the spirits were pulling her closer. She couldn't resist. On the night of the full moon, when shadows deepened and silence rang sharp, Aduka returned to the fourth floor. The hallway was darker than ever, the flickering bulb now dead. Only moonlight streamed faintly through the window at the far end. Room 406 loomed before her, its presence alive. She reached for the doorknob, cold bit into her skin, so sharp it burned. The door seemed to pulse, as though breathing. Aduka leaned closer, listening. This time it wasn't singing. It was crying, a child's cry, soft and broken, muffled behind the walls. Her chest tightened, torn between terror and pity. She whispered a prayer, then forced herself to step back. But before she could retreat, the door rattled violently, shaking against its frame. The sound thundered through the hall, the knob twisting as if something inside was desperate to escape. Aduka stumbled backward, her heart slamming against her ribs. And then, sudden, absolute silence. The door stilled, but in the silence, she heard it, her name, whispered low, dragged out by a voice she couldn't place. Aduka, her knees buckled. She ran, not stopping until she reached the safety of the lobby, collapsing against the reception desk, gasping for air. From that night forward, she knew the truth. Room 406 was calling her. It had chosen her. And if she ignored it, the curse would only grow stronger. The night Aduka finally returned to the fourth floor, the hotel itself seemed to shift against her. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes like skeletal fingers. Lamps flickered in the lobby, and even the guards avoided their nightly patrols, muttering excuses as they kept far from the staircase. But Aduka felt the pull stronger than ever, as though invisible threads tugged at her soul. She no longer dreamed of room 406. She heard it even when awake. The whispers followed her down the hallways, sometimes her name, sometimes that mournful lullaby that carried both love and grief. The spirits were no longer content with shadows. They wanted her. Clutching a small charm her grandmother had once given her, a leather pouch filled with herbs and sacred ash, Aduka climbed the staircase. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of doom, and the air thickened until she struggled to breathe. By the time she reached the fourth floor, sweat trickled down her spine though the air was icy cold. The corridor stretched long and endless, swallowed in dim light. She had walked this path before, but tonight it was different. The walls seemed closer, warped, breathing. Portraits that once hung straight now leaned crooked, their painted eyes following her every move. Shadows bled across the ceiling, sliding like living things. And at the end, room 406 awaited. Its door no longer stood still. It pulsed, swelling in and out as though it had become the chest of a living creature. The brass numbers glinted, each digit slick with something dark and wet, like fresh blood. Aduka's hand trembled as she reached for the charm. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. The spirits of the forgotten demand witness. If you open their door, you must face their truth. But beware, truth has a price. Gathering every ounce of courage, Aduka pressed her palm to the door. It was ice cold, freezing her skin, yet she pushed. The hinges groaned, and the door creaked open, unveiling the nightmare within. The room was not a room. It was a void, a blackness, so complete it devoured light itself. The floor beneath her cracked and shifted, as though she stood on the edge of a cliff. From the darkness, shapes emerged, figures, dozens of them, pale and hollow-eyed. Men, women, children. Their faces were gaunt, their mouths open in silent screams. Some wore modern clothes, others tattered rags from generations past. They reached for her, their arms long and twisted, their fingers clawed. Aduka staggered backward, the charm trembling in her grip. "Spirits of the forgotten," she whispered, forcing her voice through her fear. "What do you want from me?" And then they answered, not in words, but in a chorus of wails that shook the walls. Their voices merged into one, echoing in her skull. "Remember us." The void rippled, and suddenly Aduka saw flashes, visions of what had been hidden for centuries. A time long before the hotel, when the land was a sacred ground. Here, a village once stood, ruled by a proud chief who defied the old gods. In his arrogance, he betrayed his people, offering their souls in exchange for power. The gods cursed the land, sealing the spirits of the dead within its soil, condemned to eternal hunger. Centuries later, when the hotel was built, the curse awoke again. Every guest who stepped into room 406 became food for the spirits, their life force devoured, their souls bound to the darkness. The visions ended and Aduka gasped. The pale figures swayed closer, whispering, their hollow eyes fixed on her. One of them stepped forward, her grandmother. Her heart stopped. The spirit's face was sorrowful, her eyes glistening with tears that never fell. Aduka, she whispered, though her lips never moved. You must break the chain, or you will join us. The ground shook violently, and the void surged forward like a tide. Aduka fell to her knees, clutching the charm tight. She shouted the only prayer she knew, calling on the old gods for mercy. The pouch in her hands grew hot, the herbs within igniting with a faint glow. Light erupted from the charm, blinding in its purity. The spirits shrieked, recoiling, their forms writhing in agony. The darkness itself cracked, fissures of light splitting through its walls. For a moment, Aduka thought she had won, that she had cast them back into the abyss. But the curse was not so easily broken. The floor split wide, and a monstrous figure emerged, towering above the pale souls. Its body was a twisted amalgamation of every spirit consumed by the room. Its limbs fused, its face a grotesque mask of countless mouths and eyes. It roared, shaking the entire building, the sound like 1,000 cries of suffering. Aduka screamed, shielding her face, but the charm's glow flickered weakly in her hands. The monstrous spirit lurched forward, its clawed hand reaching for her. She realized then the charm was not enough. She had been chosen not to fight, but to witness. The curse demanded a living vessel to bear its memory. Only by giving herself could the chain break. Her grandmother's spirit appeared once more, her voice soft and broken. Aduka, the living must carry what the dead cannot. Choose or be consumed. Tears streamed down Aduka's face as the truth sank in. If she offered herself, the curse would weaken. The hotel would no longer devour endlessly, but her life, her soul, would be bound forever. The monstrous spirit lunged, its many mouths screaming her name. Aduka raised the charm high, her voice steady now, filled with both fear and defiance. I remember you. I carry you, she cried. Light burst from the charm, engulfing the room in a blinding flare. The spirits shrieked, their forms unraveling into dust. The monstrous figure writhed, its body splitting apart, collapsing into the void. The darkness cracked, shattering like glass, until only silence remained. When the light faded, Aduka stood trembling, the charm now nothing more than ashes in her hands. Room 406 was empty, no walls, no floor, no ceiling, just a hollow shell of broken wood and dust. But she was not free. As she turned to leave, she caught a reflection in the cracked mirror by the door. For a split second, it was not her face staring back. It was her grandmother's. And behind her, in the reflection, the pale spirit still lingered, their hollow eyes fixed upon her. Aduka staggered back. But when she looked again, the mirror showed only herself. Or did it? Her lips trembled as the air grew cold once more. A faint whisper brushed her ear, chilling her to the bone. It is not over. Aduka, the living must carry us still. The door slammed shut behind her with a deafening bang. Dawn came slowly to Okuda, if it could still be called dawn at all. The sun rose, but its warmth did not touch the village. Where huts once stood, there were only smoldering mounds of ash. Where laughter had once filled the air, only silence remained. And where families had slept, only survivors, fewer than a dozen, stumbled out from the ruins, their eyes hollow and their hearts broken. Before I continue, if you're drawn into this chilling folktale, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell, so you never miss the next story whispered from the shadows of Africa. The earth was still scarred with fissures where the shrine had stood. Smoke curled from them, whispering faintly like voices too far away to understand. The cursed drum was gone, shattered into fragments scattered across the cracked soil. Yet in the minds of those who had lived through the night, its beats still echoed, slow, heavy, unforgettable. The chief was gone. The warriors were gone. The children who had screamed in the night were gone. Only the frail, the quiet, and the few who had spoken truth instead of hiding behind silence remained. They stood together in disbelief, clutching each other as though to make sure they were real. An elder, his face lined with tears, his body trembling, lifted his voice above the still air. The spirits have judged us. They have taken what was theirs. But they left us alive, not as a blessing, but as a warning. His words struck like stones. The survivors knew the truth. They had been spared not for comfort, but for duty. They were the witnesses. They had seen the price of greed, the punishment for desecration, the wrath that came when sacred bonds were broken. And so, with heavy steps, they left Okuta. Not one survivor stayed. The village that had been their home for generations was now forbidden ground, a scar of memory too deep to heal. They carried nothing with them but the clothes on their backs and the weight of what they had seen. For days they walked, guided only by the sun and stars, until they reached another settlement far away. When the villagers are asked who they were, the survivors answer with trembling voices. We are what remains of Okuta village that angered the dead. The people listen as the tale unfolded. The stolen drum, the skeletal drummer, the warriors of shadow, the spirit of the grove. Some gasped in horror, others wept. And when the story was finished, the strangers bowed their heads and vowed never to touch what was not theirs, never to desecrate what the ancestors had guarded. Backhand index pointing right if the story has you gripped. Pause for a moment, like this video, and share it with someone who loves chilling folk tales. Let more people feel the haunting echo of Okuta's fate. Word spread from village to village, carried like smoke on the wind. And so the curse of Okuta became a legend, a story whispered by firelight to children and wanderers alike. They called it the drum that played itself. And in every telling, the same warning echoed. What is stolen from the spirits is never truly yours. One day, they will come to collect. Years passed, and the ruins of Okuta became overgrown with vines and thorns. Travelers who wandered too close swore they still heard faint drumming at night, carried on the wind. Some claimed to see shadowy figures watching from the trees. None dared enter the land, and those who tried were never seen again. The survivors grew old in their adopted village. They lived quietly, never again seeking power or wealth through forbidden means. Yet even in their final days, they could not forget the skeletal figure of the drummer, nor the vast face of smoke that had judged them. Their nightmares never ceased, and their last breaths always ended with warnings to the young. One survivor, a woman who had been a child when the curse struck, summed it best. Before she died, she whispered to her grandchildren, "Never take what belongs to the dead, for the dead do not forget, and they do not forgive." And so, the tale leaves us with a haunting question. Backhand index pointing right if the spirits return for one drum. How many other stolen relics still wait in silence, ready to awaken? Fire if this question chills you to bone. Subscribe now for more haunting African folk tales. And tell us in the comments, would you have dared to stay in Okuta that night?